Welcome to the Promise Podcast, where we discuss how brands can deliver on their promise with a great customer experience and business impact. I'm your host, Harald Lamberts, and in each episode, I talk to business executives, thought leaders, and founders about how to achieve effective collaboration across departments, such as brand, marketing, product development, customer experience, and support, all with one goal in mind: a seamless customer journey with great business results. In today's episode, I'm happy to welcome Jons Janssens, founder of Conway Co. Welcome, Jons.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks. Jons, before we dive in, what is a brand that truly delivers on their promise to you in terms of service quality and customer experience personally?
Yeah, I think you're probably going to try to force me to answer one, but I'm still going to give you two. So I think one from a personal preference and one from a professional preference. The professional one is basically around the luxury industry. So we work a lot for luxury brands, and often they have sort of usually at the pinnacle of customer experience, I would say, because they're very high demanding customers. Mm-hmm. One example there that I really like myself is Rimowa, those aluminium suitcases. I think they really exemplify from a brand standpoint, but also from a product standpoint, from the service delivery. I think it's that's a great example. And from a personal preference, also because I have two young kids, is Lego. I was fortunate to visit their Lego Land, which is a bit outdated, but they have something new there, and I definitely recommend that one. Is the Lego experience. I wouldn't really call it a museum, but if you look at the digital and physical journey, how it's been morphed into each other, how it's been personalized, yeah, that's a strong recommendation. That's beautiful.
Is that the Lego house, or is it a different?
I think it's called Lego Experience. It's in Billund, in Denmark as well. And in the basement they have an actual exposition of their history. But like it's even the journey up front, you need to personalize some data, and you get a personalized Lego block when you leave the museum. So that's really on point.
Nice. So it looks like their brand promise is completely worked out in everything in the whole experience.
It's playful, it's colorful, it's basically everything that you expect from Lego, and it's also really supported in terms of this flywheel that we often reference for our customers. It's commerce, content, and community all in one, and also within a physical building. And I think what's also very interesting is that they extend the experience also after when you got home. So all the pictures that you made within the exhibition, you get them delivered via digital as well. So it's really well executed.
Engagement and the whole customer journey sounds like a good example for many companies to follow. Cool. All right, so let me properly introduce you, Jons, before we get too excited in all the content. But Jons Janssens has been founding startup companies for nearly 20 years. He truly understands both customer centricity and tech stack technology, which makes him a rare breed in the industry. After spending time at PostNL and Ace of Tate as Chief Digital Officer, he founded Conway Co. 4 years ago, a boutique consultancy helping consumer brands to properly build their tech stack for great omnichannel experience and digital success. Welcome, Jons.
Thanks a lot. Quite
is
the
that
intro.
A fairly accurate description, or is there anything you want to add to that based on this? What defines your current drive and your expertise?
Yeah, I think maybe one thing to add there is also what our company's been named after. So it's called Conway's Law, and I think it has a lot to do with CX as well, because that's often how I see my role within companies. So when I was at Ace and Tate, I personally felt that sort of my role was to provide the best customer journey, customer experience that was there, and like NPS was one of my main metrics that I tried to focus on. And one of the key things to actually do that is to remove friction from the journey, is to like adopt this customer obsession type of thinking, but then also I would say adjust and configure and mold all the technology that supports that customer journey. And that's one of the key things that we also do for our current clients, is that with Conway, we only specialize in consumer and retail companies. And that's something sort of the insight that I had, is that when you're operating in a digital age, you can't really see these things separate from each other. And that's also what Conway's Law states, is that if you have a complex internal organizational or communication structure, that will be mimicked in your code base or in your technology stack. And your technology stack is the sum of all your software, basically, right? And that's basically what we've seen firsthand, is that there's only two ways to build or develop software. You either automate a specific process, and then you're basically, when you're buying the software, you need to adopt the process that the software dictates. If it's the other way around, if you're building software, you can actually mold the software towards the process, right? So, and those are the only two ways to go, and that's basically defined in Conway's law. And again, my co-founder Martin, he's a very experienced CTO, so much more technical than myself, and that's basically where we connected. We felt that we've always been the IT person or the software person, the technology person in charge. We always get the blame, right? It's always this annoying tech stuff that's not working out. But in essence, it's actually the processes or the people which usually has the problem, and not so much the technology.
For sure. I mean, it's challenging enough to have organizational silos, but it's even worse if you build it into your software for that reason. And so, I mean, that even gives you more technical depth to work with, I guess, and delivering a seamless journey even more difficult and challenging. Yeah. So I was going to say, what really unites us is, of course, that we're both dealing with organizational silos, and that. We focus maybe more on the whole customer journey and the customer experience that as a result. But of course, with Conway's Law, as you said, it actually you're enabling more the technology in the backstage to be able to deliver that seamless customer experience, because a lot of that, I guess, is invisible to customers, but they notice it for sure if their customer experience is completely fragmented or inefficient. So can you speak a little bit about what drove you to found Conway? Like what were the opportunities that you spotted in the market that you thought, okay, I need to address this? Like, can you maybe a few tangible examples of what classic mistakes are that companies make on this that you wanted to address?
Yeah, I think there's specifically two things that also brought Martin and myself together. I think one is that sort of the necessity of technology and data in the digital age, right? So we have a lot of investor clients as well, and they have these big commercial ambitions. But I just came to the realization is that there is no real commercial success without the right digital capabilities in the digital age. As simple as that. And if you don't have the technology stack in place, and we often say, as I already said, like the technology stack is the sum of all your software, but that software provides the rails to your customer journey, right? So if you want to have a seamless customer journey online, offline, you need to be in control and you need to understand how the technology either works or blocks your ambition, right? And that's often where we then advise that, hey, we have this fleshed out commercial ambition, but then I ask them for the vision, and the basic thing is, make more money. I say, that's not really a vision if you ask me, right? So how do you then convert that into an actual digital strategy that you also can execute? So I think that's something that Martin and myself really enjoy. And the second point, I think that's also at the core of what we do with Conway, is that the core belief, and that's something that Martin and myself experienced a couple of times when being in these fast growing scalable companies, is that when you want to scale a company, it needs to operate as a system. So the core belief that we have is a scalable company operates as a system with technology as its backbone, right? Or exactly. Backbone or rails, or whatever you want to call it. And if that's the case, you also need to approach it from that aspect. And I think we'll probably discuss that a bit further in this conversation as well. But if you don't understand the workflows, the processes, how your company works, it's very hard to automate it, especially with all the AI stuff that's coming out now.
And then you're addressing a good point. This is not only about removing fragmentation and a seamless customer journey, but also, I can imagine, leading to significant efficiency gains in operations as well, right? Like in terms of operational cost and
100%. Yeah, and I think that's sort of the basis of the definition of automation in general. You want to do more with less resources at a higher quality level, right? And in essence, that's sort of what you hope to achieve with any type of automation. And the core of your operating model or your operating system are those processes, the people executing them, and then the software and technology in between, basically to enable them to do so.
It's funny because you raised that point, because we sometimes run into clients that we discuss customer-centric transformation, and they say, well, yeah, this really was something we want to do, but we first need to complete our digital transformation. I'm like, really? So this is really, I mean, isn't this digital transformation the whole point of this, to serve value to customers? And what would you say there? Because I can imagine that a digital transformation is consuming all your headspace, and as an organization also is a lot of effort, and maybe you don't want to transform too many things at the same time. But at the same time, you need to architect it to serve the customer. So like, can you maybe address a few words to how you make sure that if you work with a company on digital transformation, how you make sure that customer-centric ambition is at least guiding that digital transformation? Can you?
Yeah, I would say it's one of our core beliefs or principles as well. Just like what I just said about the operating system. Yeah. For me, the operating system and your technology stack that supports it, the whole purpose of that is to deliver value to customers. Not more than that, basically, right? And you can approach it from a front stage or a backstage perspective. So when we run analysis, we often do the customer perspective. So just map the journey and understand where the friction is. And then probably you need technology to remove that friction. But what is often forgotten is also the operator's perspective, which is a very big driver for like ENPS, for example, right? If you have to work day in, day out with shitty software that is not the right tool for your job, that's a very big frustration as well, right? So
So the people, you mean the people in service delivery, yeah? So the people in customer operations that are actually doing the service delivery.
Wider than that, not just service. Like everybody within the company has to operate that machine, right? So we call it an operating model or an operating system to your organization, and all the operators on the backstage that pressing the buttons to make the customer journey work on the front stage. Basically, it's not just the customer service people; that's also your marketeers or your product owners or all the people that basically run and operate your company. And I think that's where the strongest correlation is. So digital transformation by itself, for me, is not purely the goal. The goal is customer obsession to deliver the best experience online and offline, omni-channel, whatever buzzword you want to throw into it. But in the end, the digital transformation is not the goal. That's the means to delivering more value to customers.
Yeah. So basically, that's what I meant with the service delivery. Is anybody from marketing and messages all the way to customer service, and every customer. Basically, everyone who is contributing to any customer interaction along the entire journey, of course, needs to be part of that workflow, I guess. Yeah. So, hey, I know you're also. I kind of already hinted at that, or mentioned it a few minutes ago. You're also passionate about customer journey mindset and using it not only for that customer ambition, but also as the perspective for optimizing your processes. Yeah? So and the workflow in the backstage across departments. Can you share how do you, like, for example, if you map a journey like this with one of your clients, how do you then pivot it to like, okay, what does that mean for technology choices? That how do you use it in your consulting on technology choices? Can you maybe just elaborate a little bit on that, on how that works, how you apply that?
Yeah, I think that's also core to Conway's law in a way, which is sort of the law that describes the correlation between the organizational structure and how that mimics into your code base. What I've seen a lot of companies struggle with is also how they adopt their organizational model. Is it like from a vertical perspective or from a horizontal perspective, right? So if you, for example, would say we have this concept we call a growth engine, which is basically a combination of marketing, sales, and service expertise combined into one team, which is a horizontal, how do you say,
workflow
approach to the workflow to your organization. And if your organization is fully siloed in, no, this is the marketing team that drives traffic. We have the sales team that sells. Like that's not in best interest of the customer, right? We always say that a cross function, like a silo team, doesn't have the customer in mind. So if we are very strong in then advising to say, hey, get everybody that can move the needle in that sense, put them at least once or twice a week, put them at one table to understand, okay, we have this backlog of initiatives that we want to execute. And then you need to have your engineer, your UX designer, your marketer, your content creator, all the people that you need at the table. You want to have them working together in parallel in service of that customer journey, right? So, and then there's all methodology around acquisition and retention and all these different things that they need to achieve. But I think that's one of the key things that I see companies still struggle with is that, and especially also when you venture down further in automation, the automation is also often vertically organized, right? So you have marketing processes and you have sales processes, and within those processes, you have specific tasks that could be automated. But then if you adopt this different view of looking at your organization, then often people refer to the Spotify model, for example, right? With these tribes. But I think that's one of the key things that I've never really, there's very little companies that are fully successful in that, especially when they grow bigger, right? When they're smaller, when it's just one team, it sort of works
easier
out
because you can still discuss it at the lunch table.
Exactly.
Then,
there's just one marketer, and there's not 10 different opinions and all these different things. Like the challenge becomes bigger if you have multiple journeys working across multiple phases of the journey. Then it becomes more complex.
And often, of course, that leads to also customer data fragmentation. That you say, okay, the customer data that is in marketing is not linked to what we have in customer service, so we cannot even connect who's who in that. So that and that, of course, when you think from a journey perspective to architect those kind of things, of course, it makes it a lot easier also to make sure that not only are your customer interactions within your own department effective, but they also connect to later down the journey in customer service, for example, if you know who's who actually that you're talking to. So
and that's also where sort of the CDP, so the customer data platform, comes in. That does it across the online and the offline world as well, right? So also with all these digital payments offline, you can actually track the online and the offline journey up until the moment of payment as well, right? So if you have then a unified commerce platform with a customer data platform connected, then you really can from end to end, online or offline, keep that journey centered and unified in a way.
I had Daniel here from Zeotap, a customer data platform. I had him in our show recently, a few weeks ago, and he was also saying what they do is actually those silos can be very, of course, challenging to migrate to a single platform. It can take you a few years or I don't know how long, but he was saying maybe sometimes they can stitch it together on a use case based level to at least enable specific personalization or customer service scenarios to give high profile customers the priority, for example, etc. So and that is buying you some time, of course, to configure your backstage properly. At least you can then address some of these use cases also in the short term.
But you wouldn't believe how far outdated many of these, like we still have clients that they are happy that they finally released their mobile web shop base, right? And then we bring up, hey, is your commerce platform unified? So the sales you do on the web, is that streaming into the same system that you're using as a POS in your stores? Oh, no. That's on the roadmap for 2 years. Like 2 years, like that's technology that's been here for 5 years already, right? So I think there's people.
How do you deal with that? Because you can, like you say, some companies are so behind with legacy software and technical debt that they have, like that makes them almost impossible to move. So if you get stuck so much in your technology legacy, how do you deal with that? Do you then start small, or like do you actually make fixes while you do a big re-architecture? Or can you maybe say a little bit about what smart tactical choices are there?
Yeah, I've grown to be more opinionated around this. So I used to think that I used to think that evolution was an option, but I'm afraid it's more a revolution type of thing. And after the revolution, you can adopt the evolution. So let me explain what I mean by that. If the core of the whole stack is rotten, you need a revolution. You need to sort of adopt this modern approach to a digital architecture or a software architecture in a way, right? So if it's an homegrown, organic, built on top spaghetti code base, that's often what we see the most, right? And that is mainly due to the point that most companies don't realize that there is a concept like a technology stack. They have certain systems that are clunked to each other over the years, but never from a general more vision, right? So, and I often compare it to like when you're building a house. It's not that you say, okay, let's just buy some bricks and stack them up with each other. No, you first visit an architect, you understand what we're build, want to go use stone or want to use wood, and then based on that you start executing. That's often not what happens, especially not with companies that are older than 10, 20 years old. They have this organically grown architecture basically, and there's no way around that. So then I always advise a revolution, right? You need to move to the digital age, and the big benefit of that is that actually all of a sudden you move your data and you move all the things that you want to keep, your content, for example, but all of a sudden you're from the one day to the other, you can deprecate the old stack, and then all of a sudden you're living in the 21st century in a way, right? And then from there, you need to be very mindful that you have evolutionary, continuous improvement.
And is there also an element of more modularity in that then? Like, because I guess some companies are also very afraid of one big monolithic solution for everything that the people just are skeptical about. So are you also building in some more modularity in that so that it makes you a bit more flexible to swap out new technology as it emerges, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, 100%. That only emphasizes the point for having a good architectural, strategic, technical vision up front, because then you can actually make deliberate decisions on which parts you want to have more modular than others. And also to have the counterpart to that story is that sometimes I see a lot of agencies advising headless stacks and very modular API first things. That sounds all very fancy, but you need to be very aware of what you're getting yourself into as well, because it's much more complex to manage and maintain as well, right? So there's two sides to that story as well. So yes, there's many, many benefits to have a modular API first setup, for example, or microservice or things like that. But do be aware that is mainly usually a solution for when you're also digitally mature enough to handle that, or have the investment capacity and appetite to do that as well, right? And otherwise, again, Conway's law in reverse, then try to bring down your requirements to make it simpler versus to extend the business complexity. Because I think that's one very important point to underline as well. In general, when mapping technology stacks, business complexity is your enemy, right? That's the thing that we're trying to solve for, because the more business complexity you give me in terms of requirements, the more complex stack I need to advise. And often I'd like to flip it around. So are there ways to lower business complexity? And business complexity often goes from 3 directions. So more channels, more countries, and more catalog all drive business complexity. And if that mimics into the stack, you're going to blame me. Yeah, my stack is too complex. Yeah, if you lower your business,
but also things like localization in countries in terms of service offering and all this kind of stuff, I guess, as well. Yeah.
And the IT guy always gets the blame. I'm okay with that. But there's another side to that story.
I know, for sure. So the only thing you can blame the IT guy for is not challenging the request, I guess. But
exactly.
So that makes a lot of sense, Jons. I think we see this everywhere, of course. That also in terms of optimizing customer experience and a journey that all these technical silos and lack of seamless handovers between departments is maybe a good way to put it. Is forcing to kind of implement all kinds of band-aids and short-term fixes to keep this thing alive. And you keep postponing that, kind of like radical re-architecture that is, of course, so overwhelming and frightening almost maybe. But at some you need to bite the bullet at some point, I guess, to say, okay, we need to make it future-proof. And what I like in your story is that, customer centricity, or really understanding what ultimately you want the customer experience quality or customer service quality to be. How do you want to deliver the value to the customer and differentiate as a brand? Should drive to a big extent what that ambition is, right? Because otherwise you're too quickly led by technology choices or business choices that ultimately it's about how successful you are in delivering that value to the customer. I mean, is that something more and more companies that hire you also appreciate, would you say, or is that still room for improvement there?
It might sound weird from my end, but technology is never the goal, right? So that's often where we often connect with business executives as well. When we do these workshops or collaboration together, we often never talk about technology initially, because I want to understand what their ambition is. I want to understand what type of experience they want to build. And then something like a customer journey mapping or service blueprint for us is the perfect briefing, because it sort of creates a unified language between the tech people, the business people, the commercial people, the marketing people. They all have their own lingo. And if you have a visually mapped out form to explain what you hope to achieve, everybody starts speaking the same language, right? Because I think that's one of the key things that then goes wrong. And then technology is just there to serve that purpose, basically, right? It's sort of it's never the goal. It's just the means to achieve that. It's the tools that the internal team uses, but also supports that journey. So the more clarity you have there, the better. And I think that the additional benefit there is that, like in the end, the customer, everybody, like the customer is everyone's boss, right? So from the CEO up until to the service people, in the end, everybody serves that. So that also helps with political discussions. Like in the end, like, oh no, but I think this, or the data says so. No. They just look at what the customer wants, and then in the end, we need to serve that customer.
They pay the bills in the end, so they
exactly, yeah,
for sure, yeah. So I think it journey mindset, journey working, of course, creates that more like crossing the language barriers, but it also creates what I understand, see all the time, a shared goal and the realization that you're in this together. Like, hey, really, it sounds like a no-brainer, but I mean, really, I cannot solve this by myself. I need these other guys as well, because if I'm not doing this here, then it doesn't convert there, or it churns there, or it churns here, or we have a rising customer service cost over there, which is maybe caused by my marketing newsletter, and making that connection. Without that connection, sometimes that's not even apparent to teams that actually some customer touch points are causing cost in another department or revenue for that matter. So
you can reason it two sides, right? So is it on the revenue side of your balance sheet or on the cost side of it, right?
Exactly.
And both have that as I said already, like the political arguments, and I think that's also because you also work with a lot of larger organizations, that only becomes worse, right? So if it's initially the founder plus a team of 10, it's quite overseeable, right? And everybody understands and instills that into their cultural DNA that we're serving here to the customer. And the easiest way to acquire new customers is happy other customers. I think those are also key things in that growth engine that I just mentioned, is that by essence, like we try to help people, for companies, help to win the e-com game, right? And I think, what the hell is the e-com game? Well, by essence, it's a fairly simple game. You need to do the traffic, the conversion, and the retention. Those are the main things that you hope to achieve. But it all circles around the customer, right? So if you have full customer obsession, then it's sort of,
and you're making the right choices. Then you're making the right choices as well, because then you're like, okay, and you're driven by data, not by assumptions, because some friend said this. No, but actually looking at the numbers of. So in addition to, I think, the tech stack advice and consulting that you give, I guess a lot of it is also around having a clear view of which customer data you need to make those informed decisions. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think there's at least, we call it master data, and that master data has three main components. One is the product data, the customer data, and the order data. And by essence, that is sort of the equation of what a commerce value chain is, right? So you pick a product on a website, for example, you combine it with your customer data and checkout, and what comes out is an order. That's at the core what the master data is within a commerce stack. And so that definitely at the core of what we do, and then specifically on that, and it's also what we're currently working on, is trying to define almost like a unified standard on how to improve that performance. As I mentioned, we also often work with investors, and I'm still amazed how they look at different metrics in a different way, like customer acquisition cost or lifetime value, which is a very important ratio that they always use. Everybody has a different calculation around that, right? So it's one of the initiatives that we're also considering, is to build almost like a consortium with a couple of investors to say, hey, this is the way, if you want to get invested or if you want to get funded, adopt this data structure to your product, order, and customer data, and then it's much easier to do benchmarks, for example, as well.
You mean as a best practice for actually assessing the potential of a startup, almost, in terms of their setup? Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I'm sure they will love that. For sure.
But also for internally, right? It's also to compare to other companies in your industry, for example, or it has a lot of, and especially when companies get bigger, even within companies, others have other data definitions, right? So, and then also systems dictate other data. It's like your ERP system has a different definition of your product data than your commerce platform, for example, right? And then, that's the classic single source of truth thing. It can lead to a lot of different problems.
But still, just to challenge a little bit. I mean, I fully agree with it, but just I'm just wondering, like, so many companies are still making technology first choices, like, we license this tool. I mean, probably they're hoping that it will solve their problem or something like that. I don't know. Or it's just built into the procurement processes, and that's how they license software, and based on technical requirements, without thinking how it actually helps them serve the customer. Do you see a change there? Like, is it, like, in terms of, of course, the executives that hire you, they already realize they need to do something. So that's maybe not completely reflection of the average market. But do you see a change there in terms of the executive understanding of the importance of driving this from a customer-centric point of view?
No, it's very frustrating. I've been in this game for quite a while, but customer-centric understanding, yes, but also the technology knowledge around it. In that sense, it's sort of good for us, because we're on that on-demand CTO to connect the dots on the strategic part and the technology part. But I'd love for them to adopt more a customer-centric mindset. And when you speak to them, everybody gets it, right? Especially when
nobody denies that it's important. Yeah.
No, exactly. But same with technology, right? In the digital age, how can you say technology, I don't care about it, right? But still, the people that make the technology decisions are not even dedicated people. They're sort of like an e-commerce manager is making technologies. Like, why? Like, that's a commercial person. Why would they make technology decisions? So technology is often in the basement and not in the boardroom, right? That's sort of still the problem.
So it goes back to size, right? The organizational size, making it really difficult to have coherent decision making, because everything gets delegated so much, actually underestimating how crucial some of these choices are for your business operations, I guess.
I think it's similar to also cross-functional teams. That's often a thing I tease executives with. Like, every company starts as a cross-functional team. Because there's just one marketing person, there's one developer, there's one UX designer, and then when the problem gets bigger is when there's 10 UX designers and when there's 10 marketeers, right? And then it's like, who's the boss? And like, no,
Jons, this is exactly the metaphor I always use for journey management. It's just like when you're company size of 10, you lunch together, you sit at the lunch table, you discuss these things and you understand it. But now if you scale that to 5,000 employees, then how do you make sure that's still the case? Yeah? So per proposition or per journey, or make sure that you have a multidisciplinary view so that you actually make these more balanced decisions. Okay, exactly. So then maybe move on to the holy grail that can save us on this is AI maybe. So I know you also have okay, a little bit sarcastic, but how can you, I know you're also moving on this, and of course a lot of potential and excitement around AI, how it can handle unstructured data, but also AI agents maybe taking covering a lot of tedious processes and stuff like that. You mentioned before our podcast recording here that you also focus on that. Maybe you can elaborate a bit on how you're now focusing on AI and how you see some potential for addressing some of these challenges.
Yeah. The funny part of that story is that I when I went to university, the first study I did was AI, but that was back in 2001. So the world was very different back then. But it's always been fascinating for me because the thing that I find most interesting about AI is that computers are finally smart enough to start communicating like us, like humans versus the other way around, right? So I think with touchscreen interfaces it already became a lot more easy, but if you now show like an old school mouse to a kid, they have no idea what to do with it, right? So we need to adopt that behavior. And now finally it's smart enough for us, like even with misspellings, to type things in a chat client and it will figure out what you basically mean, right? Same with voice. Like we've heard that promise for ages. And now finally with OpenAI and Anthropic and these frontier labs, they actually are getting it to a level that it's delivering on their own promise. And I think that's one of the key things that we now see from our positioning is that we get a lot of inbound requests from that as well, right? Because we hope to be the trusted digital or technical advisor to these leadership teams. And it's insane how big this wave is sort of, it's growing, right? It's like,
how do you notice it? Like what makes you say that? Like, what do you notice? Like what is insane? That the influx of demand, like
like my signals are often people that are not very digital forward, like friends of mine, right? When they started speaking to me about crypto or about blockchain or all these different things, the same happened with AI. But AI, it's like, I think that, I'm not sure if you know that metric, but there's this, how fast has a certain app grown to 100 million active users base, right? ChatGPT outpaced Instagram every app. So that's a very clear signal that something is up, opposed to like all the big investments from the US and from Europe. And
well, it also shows that it's so universal, and so like it's useful for almost every. It's not a niche; it's like useful for kind of anyone because it's language focused. Yeah, so like anyone can use it.
100%, and that's also what we see. It's almost at par with something like electricity, right? It sort of uplifts the whole economy or creates at least a disruption for the whole economy. And I think it's getting to that level as well, especially because it's so accessible, right? So they've been doing these research of LLMs and all the technology that's behind it for years, but all of a sudden with ChatGPT, it clicked. And now you see sort of the impact also on our own business in terms of our consulting efforts, that it's so much faster and things that it helps us ourselves as well. But therefore, naturally, we also get those questions. And within the operating model that I just described, which I mentioned to you, we've always been working or looking at a company like that. So for us, it's almost like a gift, right? It creates a lot of urgency for the things that we've already been doing. Because if you look at an organization or as a company of a group of people basically executing specific workflows with technology as their tool, AI or AI agents, and specifically just take ownership of a specific part of that workflow that needs to be executed. We basically see three types there. You have a workflow being executed purely by a human, right? So just a physical thing, picking something from a warehouse, for example. You have a human plus a SaaS application. That's the current world that we live in. And now sort of the new world that's developing. And I definitely don't think that AI will replace humans. It's not humans versus AI. It's humans plus AI. That's where the agents come in, right? Because the low-level tasks of writing product descriptions for your evergreen content, for example, it's not really a thing that you would like a human to be doing, right? So that's actually something that at the task level, at the bottom of that workflow, you can start automating with an agent. So that's one of the key things that we're now applying it within our current methodology already, right? So if you want to do something with an AI transformation, that sounds like a perfect end game, but it's sort of the end game of digital transformation, right? Don't start with that. Start on the other side.
Is that process automation, or is it more than that? Yeah, like, are you really using it to execute, repetitive tasks, or is it also self-intelligent in that? Or like, what do you think? on that.
I can share our framework after the call, but we split it up into 5 levels basically, right? So the bottom two, that's where the current application of AI is helpful, right? So you still need to write the query or the prompt yourself, and then it doesn't think. It just reasons based on statistical models, basically, right? And it predicts. It's a very fancy autocomplete, right? That's often what they call it. Which is to some extent is true, but it's very, very powerful because it has sort of the whole world's knowledge behind it, basically, right?
That's the point. Like the knowledge is, it doesn't matter that it's statistical, because if it's based on good quality data, then it provides useful answers, right?
And that's why we're so excited about it, because it very much aligns with our core belief of a scalable company being operated as a system, and that system consists of workflows and processes and tasks, right? And then you can basically break it down to say, okay, this agent, what the current limitation is, they stick within one specific process, right? And then you can have a section of that process. What you now see happening with Manus, for example, that's one of these Chinese agents that you've seen, that actually is becoming multi-process. So it can actually execute a wider workflow across a few processes. And that's definitely where the world is going in terms of agents. But the pace of acceleration is something I haven't really seen myself either, right? Also with the internet or with mobile or the other different eras that we've seen so far. So we're also...
Do you also feel then that has the potential to address some of these fragmented data silos in the organization, because it kind of work around that? Or do you still need to kind of like replace that to like a centralized customer data platform, or can AI just kind of like fix that for you real time? Like,
that's a really interesting topic. That's actually one of the main agents that we now develop for customers. Is that if you look at your technology stack, it's all these layers of software that you need, right? From marketing to sales to your commerce platform. And if you have a centralized data warehouse, it extracts all that data into either a data lake or a more structured data warehouse, basically, right? And what we've seen, like I've heard that for 10 years, like self-service BI. I don't believe it. It doesn't exist because nobody wants to be trained to create graphs. What happens now with AI, if you do that via an LLM, you can actually start to talk to your data, because the intelligence, and that's actually where LLMs or AI is very good at, is to, like, the stupid prompts that humans write, they'll figure out what you actually mean, right? So if you then say to the LLM, which has access to your data warehouse, say, hey, show me the pattern of last month's sales, for example, like that, right? That would usually be a brief towards a business or data analyst. Then that would go into something like Power BI to figure it out. Those steps are gone. Right, so now you just go directly as the CEO or someone who is not a BI trained person. Just ask the things that you would otherwise ask a data analyst, and then the AI will figure it out.
So you can actually query your databases basically on.
Well, that's a second use case that we often do, is like if you imagine having all your customer service hub data, right? So all the tickets, all the stuff that you've been in there, like that's thousands and thousands of tickets. Analyzing that is not a human's job. No. Right? That now is also something that's also that where an LLM is very well suited, or AI in general. It's just to talk to all your customer data, as in not so much the data from the CDP, but actually the tickets that have been sent to your customer data desk.
And what I was getting at with the question is also like, if those data sources are fragmented and not linked with the customer ID, then of course that this is like way too complicated for humans to process. But I mean, I guess AI can handle this a lot better. So then does that mean that silos become less of a problem, or is that too optimistic?
Yes, I'm afraid there's still, that's also where we sort of come in, is that garbage in is still garbage out, right? So if you don't have a single SKU for a product, SKU ID for all the products across your stack, maybe they can stitch a few things together, but in the end, also the AI will be wrong, right? It's still clean data, and having a clean master data structure is still needed in that sense.
Yeah, so that's actually quite core in your architectural consulting as well, like to have the data structure that you need to serve customers properly as the foundational for all your tech stack choices, I guess. Yeah, so
100%. And then AI is a great thing to run analysis.
Once you have that, then potential is of course unlimited, and you can almost like just talk to your data. Yeah, interesting. I had Jochem, the founder of Daydo, in here 2 weeks ago, and he said what changed it for us really with AI and Daydo is that the potential of unstructured data, and so like by mining all the customer help desk data and other sources, so survey data, etc., makes it so much easier to start from that perspective instead of manually mapping a customer journey and then prioritizing. And of course, it's quite thorough, but also quite slow and expensive. Whereas starting with just mining through your customer support data can already figure out in a few hours what your key customer issues are. And then, of course, it is a bit reactive, but I guess this is a very practical way to start with this kind of working on a burning business issue without having to map out everything first, which is then also the organizational, buy-in for that would of course be harder to sell. So, do you recognize? Okay, maybe you can add a bit to this, to like this focus on away from completeness to more like responsive to burning issues that you can spot with unstructured data. Is that something you see a trend in as well, or what do you think?
100%. It's actually one of the big second use cases that we often like in initiating these projects. We strongly believe in a crawl, walk, run type of approach, right? So as I said, AI transformations sounds fancy, but what does it really mean? That's the end game, right? To bring it very close to home and get to a wow effect as soon as you can, right? And one of these things is everybody has a customer service desk. If you extract all that unstructured data in terms of tickets, you can, and that's sort of a thing that was impossible beforehand because you would not like employ 100 people to start analyzing that. It doesn't make sense. But for now, you can actually do that. And I think one of the interesting things that is happening there is that quantitative and qualitative data is coming together in a sort of almost like a hybrid version in that sense, right? Because otherwise it's almost speaking to like those 10,000 tickets that you would otherwise have, speaking to 10,000 customers and then extracting that and finding a pattern in that, right? Which is sort of the data of the quantitative approach to it. So I think that's one of the key things.
It makes it cost effective now to go through this data because before 100%. It was way too expensive. And the fact that it can interpret your language also means doesn't have to be structured and labeled. It can interpret different ways of customers phrasing different things, the same thing in different ways to identify that it's actually the same complaint.
And then if you move that back into cohorts, for example, for your life cycles, is that you can actually spot anomalies and patterns as well, right? So it directly feeds into value for your marketing team as well.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel from COTAP went even a step further. He said, just in a few years, just ask your agent to say, okay, just convert this customer and figure out which channel is the best for him. And so I think that's maybe a bit of a Star Wars scenario, but it's a good metaphor to think about it, I guess, that way. Yeah. So
it's almost like medicine as well, right? So the AI is driving personalized medicine, and in that sense, it's also driving personalized communication to an even bigger extent.
Yeah. In your client case, you don't have to name the company name or anything, but is there an tangible example that you want to share with the audience here that is really has some success factors or crucial best practice in that you would say, hey, this is really smart way of going about things?
Specific for AI, you mean, or in general?
Yeah, in general, everything, basically everything we spoke about today.
I think one pattern we definitely see within also those luxury brands, which I meant, is that there is a transition towards going direct to consumer, right? So they often build the brand and they get a lot of authority from wholesale distribution, right, to being in the right stores. And then at some stage they actually go from indirect channels, which you don't own your customer, is something often that we have as a message there, to going to direct channels where you do own your customer, right? Which when you sell on Amazon, which luxury brands don't do, but other companies, they you don't own your customer data, which is a very important missing link in your journey, and therefore also for remarketing and life cycles and that stuff. So I think that's a specific use case we often see is, and also in general, moving the power is moving towards the brands versus the retail brands. So that's a differentiation we make, is that consumer brands, they make their own product, sell them via their own channels, and retail brands or third-party retail brands, they sell other brands basically, right? And due to the marketplaces and due to Chinese players coming in, you see there's quite a lot of pressure on that type of business model, on that go-to-market strategy. Is it's hard to struggle with that, right?
And I guess especially for high value brands that really want to play this brand differentiation, I guess, right? They want to understand the full engagement throughout the entire journey. Whereas maybe with more like low cost commodity functional products, maybe less of a concern, or is that incorrect?
Yeah, well, in general, we tend to work for companies that go from commerce led to experience led, or we often say, right? Exactly. And commerce led is just very functional, one buying journey, just get it to me fast and cheap, but it's very hard to differentiate then, right? If you don't have any, like the good digital experience we now see is that combination of that flywheel, right? So commerce, content, and community all looped into one value proposition. And therefore you see a lot of companies like take an example like Red Bull, for example, right? Is that actually a sugar drinks company, or is it more like a content publishing company, right? So,
so if you don't want to compete, if you don't want to compete on price, but actually want to have some loyalty and margin protection, then you better focus on the end-to-end experience, I guess.
Yeah, and that's often a use case we often see is to go from indirect wholesale channels to direct to consumer, and then you need to have the unified stack. You need to be able to monitor the whole journey from web to retail to all these different channels. So that's a use case we often do for clients.
And then you have full control over your customer experience and etc. and engagement with your
and
audience.
Your customer data as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, that sums it up nicely, I think, what we discussed. So, Jons, we're running out of time, getting to the end of it. So, who would you recommend now that we've spoken for 45 minutes, who would you recommend I should speak to and invite to this podcast as well to discuss these kind of topics on connecting cross-functional collaboration in organizations?
You want one name, right? Or I'll revert back, but I think it would be very interesting to actually invite a chief digital of one of these brands, right? Because that's also where I often connect with the clients that we work for, is that they don't perceive me as a consultant. They say, hey, you've been in my chair as well, right? I think that would be very interesting, not to do it as a service provider, but actually someone who's in the trenches.
I mean, that would be great. Yeah, so ideally we have a mixture of SaaS founders and people like you that focus also on the back end, but also people like that are leading a digital or e-commerce or marketing or brand department. I mean, basically what I want to do here is really bring all those perspectives into this podcast so that it really kind of inspires people on that cross-functional collaboration across departments. Basically.
Yeah, I think that's for me.
If you can do some digging and find a CDO that is willing to come on, I'd be more than excited.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Right, Jons. With that, is there any advice that you want to leave the audience with today?
Yeah, I think it's also a bit towards the topic we discussed around AI, right? I think it's one of the most important things. So not to start at the fancy top end, what we call sort of level 5 in terms of digital transformation, but try to understand where your current maturity level is and try to build it from the foundation up. I think that's one of the key things. And that's something we're going to publish a lot of content around ourselves as well, especially with all these agents now popping up, is that you need to first have your foundation in place and assess your digital maturity. And that's something where you often also start with companies that we work for. So first understand where you are and then define where you want to go.
And if you don't, you only make things worse. Is that fair?
You only sink deeper into the mud or into the swamp.
More reliant on your technical depth. All right. Well, make sure you understand your technology for the digital fitness and customer centricity. I guess those are like 2 fundamental principles, I guess, in how you support your clients at Conway Co. So we'll make sure, of course, to publish this podcast and tag your company also in the post. So if people are interested in learning more about Conway, then of course they will know where to find you. So
that maybe just the thing to leave you with. That's the core of what we do, the digital fitness improvement, right? So when you're digitally fit, you can actually adopt and be agile to what your customer wants, right? I think that's the connection between what we do.
And you get AI ready is what I hear from you as well. Like if you want to leverage the power of AI, you better get your shit together, I guess.
100%.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Jons. So that was another episode of the Promise Podcast, where we discuss effective ways for brands to deliver on their promise with a great customer experience and business impact. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, or leave a review. Check haroldlammers.com for more great content. Hope to see you again in the next episode. Until then, keep pushing to deliver on the promise.